we have our first guest from the real world of Formula One joining us, and they're just miking him up. I was really interested when I read the history here, just to understand that our guest from Ferrari, although he's been hugely successful in Ferrari over the last 10 years, prior to the 10 years, of course, he was 20 years successful in Motorsport Valley. And I think it's quite I'm going to take Ross on that journey if his mind can go back that far. So let's just welcome Ross Brawn from Ferrari, Technical Director. Welcome, Ross. Nice to meet you at long last. Yeah, Ross and I actually could bore you all because I used to be managing director of a company that produced Intrepid fishing reels. And actually, Ross, I read somewhere, that's quite a weakness for you too, isn't it, fishing?
Yeah, it's a pleasant distraction, fishing.
But you say here that you enjoyed as much as Formula One. Ross, a few questions that I throw together, and thank you for joining us on a really busy day. And the idea of the conference, as I know you pick up, is to try and help our American friends understand the relatively complex world of Formula One and get full value from it. America being such a powerful market. Just to warm you up a little, this year's performance of Ferrari and its championship so far.
Yeah.
How would you score yourself at school, at university? How are you doing?
Sorry, can you all hear me?
Is the mic
working?
Is it okay? Good.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
I think could do better is the analysis of this year. Obviously, we've had some years ago a very successful period, and last year was extremely difficult. We weren't competitive, and we had to try and understand the reasons why we'd lost our competitiveness. And I think we've made some changes, we've made some improvements, and it's starting to come back this year. So won a couple of races, and we're pushing, but we're not quite there yet.
You know that I'm going to say, what is our good friend Pat Symonds, who of course in your history, you work closely with Pat. Is the dominant area still aerodynamics? Is it, just give us as a layman, where is it happening this year? Because it moves so fast.
Well, I think the fascination of Formula One is it is all those aspects. Yeah. It's impossible to win if you're only strong in one area, and that includes a driver. You can have a fantastic driver. If you don't have the foundation of the car, then he won't succeed. Of course, he can make the difference when there's some small margins between cars, but he can't make the difference if the margin is too high. And in terms of performance of the car, then the aerodynamics, the engine, the chassis, and particularly the tires, all the elements that have to be 100%. And if you're a few percent behind on any of those elements, then you're not competitive.
We were talking just before you came in, Ross, that companies with this huge research budget of a Toyota or a Mercedes or whatever, when you compare them to companies like Fiat and Renault, Formula One's a very harsh environment. It's a harsh school to learn that actually, although you have lots of cash, you're going to be watched by a big audience. And for that regard, Fiat and Renault do particularly well, because you'd have thought that the Toyota investments and the Honda investments would have paid off by now, wouldn't it? Would you? Just comment on that. I mean, most of the people feel they'll buy their way to success.
I think the difficulty is knowing where to put your resources and then having the people that can utilize those resources. I mean, if you look at the relative areas, 1% performance on the engine will give us about 1/10 of a second. 1% performance on the aero will give us slightly more than 1/10 of a second. But I know I can get that 1% from aero at about 30% of the cost that I need to spend on an engine. So for a company like Ferrari, who've had this long evolution, we know where to put our resources to spend the money in the most effective way. And in fact, most of the guys at Ferrari, myself, I worked for Arrows when we had no money. Aldo Costa, who's the chief designer, worked for Minardi. Rory Byrne worked for Tolman. We've all come through the industry with teams that had barely 2 pennies to rub together. And we had to use that money in the most effective way. So when you get to a team like Ferrari that has not the best budget, but a very good budget, you really know where to spend that money. And I think one of the difficulties for large corporations that come into Formula One is they have very, very good budgets, but sometimes it's difficult for them to know where to focus that money and still get the best bang per buck. And to be as competitive as they can be.
I know this is going. I have to say this, but you're born there and you've got some feeling for it. Motorsport Valley or Italy. If you were the boss of Toyota, you'd have stayed close to either the Italian Valley or the Motorsport Valley, wouldn't you? You'd have recognised that's hard in Cologne, or is that not
It
true?
is more difficult. I mean, there is it's pluses and minuses when
Yeah.
you're based in the so-called Motorsport Valley in the UK. You've got a large pool of labour, but it's under huge demand.
That's
You know, the best people are in huge demand, and therefore they're expensive, and sometimes they can move around a little bit, which doesn't help stability. One of the great things for us at Ferrari is Ferrari's been there for so long. There's been a culture with the local industry, local universities, local schools, and it's developed very well. So we can draw on local resources for our people, and we do pluck various people out of the industry where we need to, but more and more, Ferrari is focusing or coming back to Italian or let's say indigenous engineers,
Yeah.
because we've got the system running there.
Yeah.
There was a period at the beginning of the 90s when Ferrari was in a little bit of difficulty, and I joined the company. Rory Byrne joined. A lot of new engineers joined because we had to restructure the company. Once we'd restructured it, we've now got a very good flow of engineers coming through the Italian system to help replenish our needs. Now, of course, you set yourself up in Cologne. You've got neither the advantage of the Motorsport Valley, or you haven't got the local community organised yet, so it is more difficult.
Will BMW find that in Switzerland?
I suspect so. I think that'll be a challenge for them as well. So it's pluses and minuses,
Yeah.
but I think at Ferrari we've got a good balance.
It's an interesting, because a dimension there that Herb Fischel was talking, and Herb, of course, you must have heard of General Motors for all those years. And
Our paths have crossed a few times.
and it's just interesting that the feeling is these major automotive makers will be able to spend their way to success. And I've often said, I think there is more to these successful teams, and it is about putting resource, in the general meaning of the word, money, people, intelligence. It's the resource applied in the right way, and it's dancing on the head of a pin with that decision, isn't it?
Yes,
That's
it is.
where your skill is.
Yeah, it's for sure. The funding alone is not the only criteria, and you need to have the funding. There's no poor teams winning world championships. That's a fact. But teams like Renault, teams like Ferrari, we're doing it for a very good budget, but nothing like the budgets that are spent by one or two of the other companies. But the intriguing thing is, if those companies ever got it right, I don't know how we'd compete. So that's the fear. But somehow, there seems to be some
Actually, that's
inverse relationship between ultra-high budgets and...
Are you really saying that you can have too much money? No, I'm not. I don't want to say. But in a funny way, the money doesn't win you the championship.
No, it's not. It's not the only factor. I mean, sometimes too much money comes with a lot of bureaucracy,
Yes, yeah.
and that's the difficulty. What's great about Ferrari is there is, let's say, there's a petty bureaucracy that any company has, but there's no senior management bureaucracy. I mean, Jean Todt's the leader of the racing division. I look after all the engineering, and Luca de Montezemolo is the president, and that's it. There's no board of directors we have to make presentations to. There's nothing like that. The decisions are made there. We agree our budgets with Fiat, and Fiat are great because once the budget's agreed and we've made they leave us alone. Good times, bad times, they leave us alone.
That's
And
tremendous.
so, and sometimes I feel if you get above that, and then you start having groups of directors deciding the direction of the Formula One team, which is a very fast-moving environment, then it can slow it up, and that's the danger.
I fully understand if the answer is no comment, but so I'll lead the thing by saying one feels that's the problem at Honda at the moment. It's more corporate governance.
It's
than it
difficult
is.
for me to
Yeah,
really
okay,
comment on other teams, but I mean, I just
I-
feel that's the reason why
Yeah.
we've been able to achieve what we've been able to achieve. That at the end of the day, the reference for people is a very small
Yes.
group. I mean, if you're on the sporting side, you talk to Jean Todt. If you're on the engineering side, you talk to myself, or on the engine,
Yeah.
Paolo Martinelli. People know their reference points. and they haven't changed in 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think it's a strong asset of Ferrari. And those, if I was involved in those teams, that would be the thing that would be very important to me.
Interesting. You know, and we just have to move into this area. I wish I haven't phrased my words correctly at the moment, but there are going to be major changes in the development spend in Formula One if the regulations go through that are apparently going through. Are you of the belief that that will decimate the employment of people in Formula One? In other words, will there be really a large number of layoffs in Formula One that will really cut to the quick of the money? I mean, I'm wandering around, I call it Motorsport Valley, and I'm going from one doomsayer to, oh boy, we're going to be laying off half the and then the others saying, I don't understand what the fuss is about. Where are you in that? Are you a, I don't know, hawk or a dove? I don't know quite which one it is, really.
Well, I think you have to decide what determines the number of people that are in a team. And in reality, it's not the objective, it's the funding. And if I had twice as much funding for my aero program, I'd employ more people and I'd try to achieve more. So what's happening at the moment is there's a move from the FIA to take the spending out of engines, because engines are not large return on investment, but they could be critical return on investment. That means that if you don't have the right engine, you may not be competitive, but to have the right engine could be hundreds of millions of dollars. And that takes it away from even teams like Ferrari or Renault. So the idea is that let's control the engine to a point where you can have competitive engines for a more modest budget. And that will undoubtedly mean less research or less intensive development in the engine area. But my belief is that that resource that the teams will then find themselves with, they'll have to put it into other areas or else they won't remain competitive. So let's assume we have 50 people on the engine side who suddenly have nothing to do. They're all bright, clever people.
They're engineers.
Yeah, and they can be redeployed in all sorts of different ways. So I'm not sure we're going to take a knife to our staff numbers, because what determines the number of people we're able to employ at the end of the day is our commercial viability with our sponsors and partners. And
I hadn't really thought. I thought some of these development areas that they had closed down in quite a lot of areas, but you're really saying, well, no, we can switch them from engines to aero to materials to, I don't know.
Yes.
The regenerative braking box. Which
well, that's it. I mean, one of the interesting avenues.
So you really can.
One of the interesting avenues that Max Moses' vision is to use the nature of Formula One to accelerate the development of some technologies. And he believes that and I think we all recognize in the future, there's going to be new technologies which come along for automotive usage to make better use of energy resources. So can you use Formula One to accelerate that process? Because one of the undoubted things about Formula One is it's a battle between the top engineering companies in the world. And they're measured every 2 weeks. So the how well they're doing and the rate of progress is very intense. And you can take lots of examples like carbon fiber brakes or composite technologies, etc. When Formula One grabbed hold of them, they took off. And the idea is that let's introduce some of these technologies, give them to Formula One, give them the challenge. And there's all sorts of things. There's all sorts of devices for storage of energy. And see if Formula One can take on that technology and develop it at a rate which is perhaps beyond the norm. And that's where I think these resources are going to get reutilized.
And do you like that?
Yes, I mean, we all have a social conscience, and it's a new challenge. I mean, as an engineer, I welcome a new challenge, as long as I feel that we're going to have the ability to compete. Because if I see technology where I look at the profile of Ferrari and think, well, that's technology which is so far away from what we know that we're not going to be competitive. And I think that's the trick. We've got to try and identify technology which is going to be interesting and it's possible for Ferrari to utilize. I mean, one of the things about a Formula One car is there's a huge consumption of energy under braking.
Yeah.
So if we can use that energy
Yes.
and use it to accelerate the vehicle, then that's very attractive.
Yeah.
And that may have a spin-off. So the idea is, how can we capture the energy under braking and then reutilize it for acceleration? And there's lots of ways of doing that, flywheel systems, capacitors, all sorts of methods. And if the rules can be written where we feel, as a company, we can tackle those problems, then it will be very attractive to us. And it could be attractive to us for our road car division, of course, because we're high-performance cars. High-performance cars which are under constant pressure to reduce their emissions, reduce their consumption. So it could also be very interesting for us on the road car side.
And although you haven't said it, the inclination is set, as long as it doesn't destroy the show that is Formula One, as long as that's a showcase for technology and a fast series and of all the right things, then you don't mind taking these challenges on. You find them interesting.
No, absolutely. And I think, to me, the essence of Formula One is the technology side and the gladiatorial side, the drivers and the technology. And if you take one away, you don't have Formula One anymore. And you know, if you take the standard class formulas where there's no technology and you just have the drivers, they're interesting and they produce some interesting racing. But for me, they don't have the fascination that Formula One has. And having the technology side but controlled, and having the human side, the sport, that's a unique combination for Formula One.
And it's funny, it is true to say, the way you phrased it, and I hadn't really swallowed that either, really regenerative braking, okay, that's something that you guys, motorsport, Formula One particularly, takes these things on and catalyzes the research very quickly. You know, they're on, they're
That's
trying,
the idea, yes.
they're fast.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they're there forever. What you're going to say is, okay, well, and then we'll pass it on. We tend to, I say, we rape ideas and pass them on.
Yeah.
And you think, and now that would be interesting. It would really make a development test house
Yes.
for automotive. Okay.
Well, yeah, my association with automotive companies is they find Formula One is a very useful environment because of the rate of change.
Yes. Yes.
Not necessarily the technology per se, but the approaches we take to try and accelerate the development of technology. And I know from my associations that, you know, companies who send their engineers into a Formula One environment get them back again if they can